At the same time, the GCC leaders ask themselves how much they want to go on, how much longer they want to go on with the conflict. And the answer is nobody really wants to go on with the conflict, because they all understand that more wars and more prolonged wars can actually trigger more instability at the borders. So it is quite a sensitive situation.
Yes. Ms. Bianco, before I let you go, my question to you is, the GCC has been discussing the move from a council to a union. There are a lot of discussions going on about that. How would such a move transform the Arabian Gulf?
How would, sorry, can you repeat?
How would such a move help in transforming the Arabian Gulf and its visions and its policies and so on?
That would be very transforming. That would definitely turn the GCC into a stronger actor, a more powerful actor in regional terms, and that would also, if successful, put in line different at the time diverging at some time perceptions and policy lines. So that would definitely it would create a very strong counterbalance to Iran, and it would remain to be seen if that would be perceived by Iran as a constructive or a destructive mode, and hence why it would encourage more aggressive or less aggressive behavior. But in general terms, it would be very, very transformative. Definitely, the challenge in Yemen, I think, would be the war in Yemen would be, I think, the first scenario that would be affected, because there it would definitely encourage all actors on the ground, including the rebels, the Houthi, to subdue to their aspirations and aggressive intentions quickly. That I would think is the first scenario that would be affected.
Yes. Thank you, Ms. Bianco, for your insight and for joining us. And that was Ms. Cinzia Bianco, an analyst for Eurogulf Information Center and a PhD candidate at the University of Exeter. Returning back to the studio, Mr. AbdulGhaffar, Ms. Bianco had a very much to say, and some of the points were emphasized that you said yourself, but she went more in depth when it comes to the interferences from outside. Now, when she even talks about when she talks about Iraq, about Yemen, about the interferences here locally in the GCC, we always see one name behind it. Iran is always behind it, and there are always interferences. Your comments, please, about that.
Well, I mean, Iraq, since the 1979, revolution, has actually mandated that exporting the revolution is at the forefront of its constitution, and it's part of its identity and ideology. While some have actually argued that it's pursuing more of a pragmatic approach, where it's relying more on militias to carry out its interests in different countries. And this is actually a much more cost-effective solution for them, which they can influence 100%. You see this in Iraq, you see this in Syria, you see this in Yemen, and there are even reports that it's occurring in Bahrain as well. Yeah. And this is very clear that they're actually pursuing Iranian interests in different countries. And of course, it's a lot easier to put a barrier between yourself as Iran. So if you're involved as a proxy on behalf of Iran, there's a barrier, so it cannot lead directly back to you. And actually, we've seen the full blossoming of the proxy project in Lebanon, where Lebanon and Hezbollah now is a formidable political player and a military player within the country, and the country's future actually has a lot to depend on this terrorist organization. So you can see that this development is actually within the lines of Iranian ideology, and also that is supported within its constitution.
Now let's talk about the solution. Ms. Bianco had some views on the GCC joint efforts, and part of them were that basically first Yemen is going to be, the problem in Yemen is going to be faced, and hence the other one. So what is your response to Ms. Bianco's views?
Well, obviously Yemen is more directly involved with all the GCC states to certain degrees, of course. So obviously in the medium to short term, this is actually the solution that every actor on the ground wants to create a resolution for. They want to negotiate, they want a political settlement for the conflict, because As the Ms. Bianca also said, the conflict is dragging on, and the more it drags on, the more it will enter a quagmire state, which is prolonged conflict, which will increase the instability in the region. And you see this now. We have Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula now is becoming a lot more formidable player again. And you see Daesh, which is having a lot more influence in the region as well. Yes. And but actually what's interesting about the Yemen case is that the country has always been divided along tribal lines. So the effects of proxies actually can be counterbalanced if the regional players implement policies to actually attain stability. So that's an advantage over it. Well, of course, you also have the question of governance post-conflict. Mm-hmm. You know, what will be the Yemen's future? What will occur within the political sphere? How will different parties interact with each other? How will the interest be defined for these countries? So, of course, a GCC union will want to tackle Yemen immediately because it affects all the countries in the short and medium term, and prolonging the conflict will also prolong the instability in the region. And Yemen, of course, has a very long border with Saudi Arabia. Mm-hmm. So any acts to create stability in Yemen will, of course, create stability for Saudi Arabia and its borders.
As a union, they would be able to basically solve all of the problems that might face post-war, pre-war, during war, and everything.
Well, you will hope so, of course, you know. But of course, it's a very long, complicated process when it comes to any sort of military conflict. Yeah. And then you see it's very multifaceted. It involves many different players. Represents different interests from different sides. So, but having a union, a common international body within the region actually will help streamline these processes. Mm-hmm. The countries can better create policies to pursue their interests in a more streamlined vision, and actually will create a counterweight to Iranian expansionist agendas in the region, which has been actually forecasted to increase after the nuclear accord that was signed.
Yes, yes. Yeah. The Gulf Cooperation Council, the council itself, not the Gulf countries, they enjoy a very friendly relationship with all the countries, a friendship or a relationship that is based on respect, on cooperation. How does the council itself push forward these ties?
In terms of developing into deeper relations, well, I mean, the GCC have always understood the significance of their location. They're situated between the ancient crown of the British Empire, which was India, and there's always been the segue towards that key interest for the British Empire. So obviously the historical importance of the Gulf cannot be underestimated. Mm-hmm. So obviously the world is very much interested in the Gulf region, so maintaining very strong cordial relations is very important for all the GCC states. And this is why they don't take lightly to any interventions from Iran as well, because it upsets the balance within this region that is not only a region for the regional actors, but also for the international community as well, because of the significance of oil, of its geo-economic location. So obviously pursuing different alliances on an international and regional level is very critical for the GCC states. So they will always look for any opportunities to further develop their relations with the world.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. Now, regional security is one of the main challenges we are currently facing, and the Gulf Cooperation Council has exerted tremendous efforts to deal with it. Let's take a look at the entity's work in this regard.
The Gulf Cooperation Council has taken many courageous steps by exerting tremendous efforts to maintain the security and stability of the region. Most notable example is the Arab coalition led by the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia to restore the legitimacy and security of Yemen. Their involvement in the US-led international coalition against Daesh, in addition to forming a 34-nation coalition to combat regional terrorist threats.
So there's always been a strategic and a security-related aspect to the GCC. I think even more important than the economic side. And they had been planning and developing interoperable technologies as well as structures so that their military forces can be combined if the need ever came, and they could work together for collective defense. Essentially, in 2011, for the very first time, the Operation Peninsular Shield Force was established and went into action when it became clear that it wasn't just demonstrations here, but also the hand of Iran. And I think that the GCC played a fantastic role in ensuring that Iran was going to be deterred and wouldn't try to actually get physically involved in Bahrain directly.
The latest coordinated and unified stance taken by the GCC countries towards many pressing issues and files send a clear message that the GCC countries are capable of defending their interests and gains of their peoples and have the will of taking effective action against any threats to their security. They have a great responsibility to preserve regional security and stability and stand united against plots of chaos and destructions that some of the countries are going through. The question now is what is next for the Gulf Cooperation Council regarding regional security? What should such a strong unified entity do to deal with and overcome the challenges it is facing?
Welcome back. Mr. AbdulGhaffar, after seeing this report, we see that the GCC is, the role that they play is defending the region is undeniable. What is your view about the war over the legitimacy in Yemen?
Well, the whole Yemen conflict is deeply rooted in legitimacy. The Arab coalition actually is striving to restore the legitimate and internationally recognized government of Yemen back into the country. So legitimacy is at the forefront of the conflict itself. And it's very unfortunate that certain players have actually tried to usurp this notion, especially with the assistance of foreign intervention within the Yemeni political sphere as well. So we see this with Iran actually creating very solid ties with different Houthi elements, with different militant elements, and they're actually coordinating their interest for the advancement of not only the Houthis, but as well for creating a stronger footprint of Iranian intervention in Yemen itself. And Yemen itself is actually, it's located in a very strategic location where you have Bab al-Mandeb, which is the main channel to access the Red Sea and Suez Canal. And but unfortunately, we see within the international community that some critics, you will say, have actually been criticizing the efforts that could lead to a political solution for Yemen itself. And it's unfortunate that when you have as well on the aid deliveries units, and how the Arab coalition is actually striving to get different aid into the country, but it's not possible because different interfering elements are actually blocking any aid shipment in this capacity. And as well, you also have the different political efforts to reconcile or to create a political solution for Yemen itself. So legitimacy is very deeply shrouded within the Yemeni conflict as well, and it's also to safeguard the borders of the GCC states and the region as well.
These critics, it would seem logical that the GCC would want to defend its borders, and as you mentioned before, Yemen has a very big borderline with Saudi Arabia, with Oman as well. The critics aren't they supposed to look at that logical point of view that yes, they need to defend themselves, and defending themselves is defending their borders?
Of course, obviously, in war, unfortunately, there's always going to be tragedy and error. But at the same time, the Arab coalition has taken very strong steps to ensure that precision is always a key component of the operation itself. They always strive to get the most in-depth intel before conducting any sort of operation. And actually, just from the beginning of the conflict itself, we saw that communication play a key role within the operation. You see this with the regular briefs that is occurring from the Saudi military, and there is actually a push for transparency in terms of reporting on what is occurring in Yemen, because there's always going to be, like you said, the criticism that wants to sort of negate any efforts to resolve the issue itself. So on this level, communication and transparency has actually been very developed for this conflict, and the Arab coalition actually is striving even further to maintain this line of communication so the people understand what is happening on the ground.
Yeah. we've talked about this, and you've mentioned it just a minute ago. The Arab coalition does not only help fight the Iran-backed Houthis, but they also provide huge contributions when it comes to the humanitarian aspects, as well as the humanitarian aid to those affected by the war. How does the help that they are providing ease the standards of living for the people in Yemen?
Well, of course, the war is actually very difficult. It's affected millions within the country, and the GCC, being the culturally embedded within the Yemeni people, have a certain fondness for the people, and this is, of course, the humanitarian deliveries actually occurs on a much more personal level for them. So you see more efforts to deliver humanitarian aids to these regions. But like I said before, because of different interfering forces from Iran and how they've supplied arms to the Houthi rebels, are deterring these humanitarian shipments, which is unfortunate, because really when you have Iranian ballistic missiles going in the hands of Houthi rebels, and they're targeting vessels from the GCC states or from the United States, this shows clearly that the Houthis intend to really negatively affect their own people as well, that they're not allowing aid to reach to their borders. And this is, of course, a travesty, and unfortunately this is the reality on the ground.
Something that a lot of people are looking forward to, especially here in the GCC, is the move from being a council to being a union. Yes. I'm going to ask you the same question I asked Ms. Bianco. How would such a move transform the Arabian Gulf?
Well, just from a fundamental level, it would streamline GCC decision-making process, and where you have mechanisms that can actually develop